Welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast.
So with that then, another MotoGP season is over. The Solidarity Grand Prix of Catalonia. I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of the weekend is my co-host Dill. Now, of course, first of all, was a different venue than we were expecting for this final race. Of course, it usually is Valencia, and that was the expectation this year, but unfortunately, due to the horrendous disaster that's going on there with all the weather and the flooding, we had to change venues, and that did shake up quite a bit because obviously we came to Catalonia earlier on in the season, right in the middle of summer, really, really hot. Everyone kind of expected coming here in the winter, well, sort of autumn to winter, track conditions would be cooler, grip would be better, but that's not what we found, was it, Dill? It was a pretty strange weekend in terms of the track conditions itself. Not much grip, and a lot of confusion by a lot of the riders across the three classes.
Yeah, the cold temperatures usually means the temperature of the tarmac just goes down and just offers more grip. Usually the fastest session of a whole race weekend is usually the practice on a Saturday morning, just because the temperatures are almost ideal. Whereas Catalonia, it's just such a warm racetrack. I'd imagine it's just used nearly every race weekend, or every weekend there's something going on, because even with us going here at this time this year, a week ago there was some sort of car racing there. I know it's a popular place for track days, so I'd say it's just one of those racetracks that just all year long has activity. It was last resurfaced in 2018, and that doesn't sound that long ago, but we are in dire need of a resurface just because the overall grip is just so low that the tarmac is just so smooth that it doesn't offer any grip. So a lot of teams came here thinking that we could see a much different style of racetrack, a really grippy one, but unfortunately it wasn't the way to be, and it really affected all three classes, definitely.
Yeah, it certainly did, and made sort of tyre wear higher than expected because of the spinning, the lap times were slower. So, yeah, the races played out somewhat differently to the ones earlier on in the year. But we may as well actually get into the racing itself now then with Moto 3. And I know we've said this so much this season, but we're going to start with David Alonso. Again, I've got down here that he summed up his season. He basically did. He won the race in the way that he's done it so many times. He's kept his head, kept looking after his tyre. You know, he tried to lead initially. He was pole position. He got a bit of a lead into turn one. Tried to pull on the first lap. Didn't really work. They sort of stayed with him. Then he dropped back to about 5th place. Sat there for quite a lot of the race. Towards the end, fights his way through. Penultimate lap, goes from 3rd to 1st in basically one corner. Then just holds the lead to the end. New record, 14 race wins in a season, most ever across the three classes in a Grand Prix. I think is he now 5th on the, so out of everybody in the Grand Prix paddock, so Moto2, Moto3, MotoGP, he is like 5th on the Grand Prix wins list, ahead of Quartararo, equal with Martin. It is absolutely incredible. This kid's been around for 2 seasons, and he won like 3 races last year, and he's just been racking him up this year. I mean, what else can we say about him? He absolutely, again, rode a perfect race, just showed why he's won the championship. I imagine it's the biggest winning margin ever in a championship as well. He broke the 400 points barrier. It just absolutely incredible season for Alonso, and this race just pretty much underlines that for me.
Yeah, it was very similar to Qatar, where he did it all very late in the race, got it done, and then managed to hold on. And he's kind of done the same again at Valencia, and in between, pretty much most of his race wins have come that way. He's kept it interesting, and he just sits at P8 for most of the race. And even like it gets to a point where you just start to see the patterns throughout the races, and it got to probably not even half race distance, and he was slowly dropping down the field, and I was like, I was kind of just keeping an eye on him to see. It's just interesting to watch him, because ever since probably ever in the lightweight class, when I was back as 125s, or as long as it's been Moto 3, nobody's ever been able to control themselves that much in a field of kind of such an aggressive championship, where they can actually just put themselves where they want in a race. We saw, like, in years gone by, riders be very good at it, and at like 5 laps to go they might be in the top 6, and they just seem to always find a way to kind of get there, and we'll say 8 out of 10 races they're on the podium. But we've never seen someone be able to do it week in, week out, drop to 8, and then just, with about 5 laps to go, just somehow be second. And then 3 laps ago, he's taking a lead, and he's putting in then the fastest laps of the race, and he just stretches. He just does it every race weekend, and it was a 7 he won in a row now at the end of the year. So after breaking many records this year, and by far the best Moto 3 season. Problem, I could argue 1 to 5. The only thing I'd say with 1 to 5 is that the imbalance in factory versus kind of privateer teams back in the day was pretty big. So to see a rider do such a dominant job as Alonso's done this year in a packed field where most of the equipment is pretty bang on. Obviously, there's a bit of disparity between the Honda and the KTM branded bikes, but you wouldn't think that they're 2 seconds a lap slower. Like, there's probably a small bit in. So the fact he's had that much, and what I've kind of noticed as well recently is that his qualifying times have been good. Again, he's on pole this weekend by 3/10, big margin. But like at start of season, we saw much bigger margins. So I still feel, as much as he's been so dominant, I don't think he's been pushed this hard this season. I think he's been pretty comfortable everywhere, and that's probably why we've seen he has such an advantage that he can sit there in the middle of the pack kind of just play with them and then make his switch and go for it. Because I think we've probably seen riders similar where they can kind of play a race out in the head and strategically plan ahead and kind of get in the right positions to make a good run at the last few laps to get on the podium. But we've never seen someone with this. I just think he has just so much more in terms of just mentally and just in terms of his speed. I think he can just kind of process the race better than I've ever seen anyone. So him moving up to next year into Moto 2 is going to be a really interesting prospect. Moto 2 has been one of those categories where people have had really good lightweight Moto 3 seasons and then moved up to Moto 2, or if they come from outside of the Grand Prix paddock, the Moto 2 has taken people a couple of years. So even Pedro Acosta took him a good season to kind of get his head screwed on for that one. So it'll be very interesting to see how he goes next year in Moto 2. But to kind of finish up on him, really, he's had near perfect season, really, for me.
Yeah, he really has. I mean, the only thing I will throw to you, clearly it has been a fantastic season and he has been absolutely dominant, but do you think the actual level of dominance maybe is partially down to the field he's against as well? Because I get the slight impression that maybe the field's a little bit weaker than maybe it has been in previous years. Obviously, David is like on the level of a rider like Pedro Acosta, but perhaps the people that were in the class at that time were a bit more up to. I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of an impression I have got over the course of the season a little bit.
It's hard to say because on one hand you could say, well, if he's winning by that much and he's that comfortable in field, surely there has to be a bit of it should be black and white that he's a much better rider and he's cut from a different cloth to the rest of the field. But then at the same time, is he just that good that he's made a very good Moto 3 field look average? Is you can play both sides of the coin. For me personally, I'd say no. I don't think they're. I think it's a good field, but I'd say the riders that would have been his main competition are probably either not in the best equipment, or they're just new to the class. Like Piqueras, for example, I rate him quite highly, rookie this year, so that can immediately almost rules him out for running him closer to a title. Holgado's a good rider, but I don't rate him as one of the best ones to come through Moto 3 in the last couple of years. Obviously we did see Acosta's moved out, so that's another rider out of his way. Yeah, a lot of the good riders have moved up, exposed, but then there's still another crop coming through, but I just don't think they're ready to be able to do what Alonso has done, and he's probably made them maybe look a bit more tame than they actually are. I think next year we'll see in Moto 3 a much more like a Sergio Garcia and Eisen Gaviria, where there's one or two people where they're probably a class of field and they go at it for the whole season, and there's other riders get involved, but there's a much more of a whole battle going on. Because if you take, just for example, take Alonso out of it, look at the fight for second in championship, we would have had a great run in for the championship there alone, because we went down to the last race in Valencia. So I think he's just had them covered, but I wouldn't say the field is especially weak, because I think a lot of people would look at Dalla Porta's year. It's probably not been the best field. He probably got a bit of a transition year and got one of those titles where maybe he probably look what he's gone on to do. Obviously he's had his shoulder injuries, but he's not been he's not kicked on the way other Moto 3 world champions have. So I don't think that would be the underlining point I take from his season. I just think that Alonso's been that good that he's made a pretty decent field still look a bit average.
Absolutely not the underlying points. Clearly it is more Alonso, but I was just wondering whether maybe that plays into the fact that it's like 14 wins and maybe probably would have been more like 10 or something like that, maybe against different riders. But like you say, I think there are some good riders in the field, but perhaps just rookies like Piqueras. I mean, we had in the field this weekend Alvaro Carpe was in a wild card as well. I'm sure he's going to be pretty good next year when he comes into the class, and probably have a year as a rookie and then be decent. Some of the other guys not quite lived up maybe to what we expected, like Rueda, for example. It's not really been...
Yeah, he was a big disappointment for me this year.
He's saying where he is next year, so it'll be interesting. But yeah, it's been... He started the season with a lot of promise, but yeah, it has certainly been a bit of a a letdown. Well, maybe not a letdown, but a bit of a disappointment in terms of the expectation. But of course, you did mention Holgado there. He actually had a pretty good weekend. Almost sums up his season. Basically, like when on his day, he's basically as fast as Alonso, right behind him to the line, and in that manner finishes second in the race and secures that runner-up spot. We've been talking about that over the last few podcasts. 3 or 4 ago, we were saying, oh, he's got it done easy. Then he had a rough run. Obviously, he crashed in Sepang pretty needlessly and put it at jeopardy, and was kind of like, well, now maybe it's up for grabs. Maybe Ortola could get it, or maybe Via could get it, but he's ended up bringing it home in pretty much one of his better races for the second half of the season, to be honest, right on the back of Alonso. And yeah, again, on his day, he's right there, but he doesn't have his day often enough, and he does just disappear sometimes, unfortunately. But good season overall for him, but maybe he'll be a bit disappointed because last season, obviously, he fought for the championship roughly. It was first half of the season, he definitely was in the fight, but after that, he kind of dropped off. But I'm sure he would have been expecting to be trying to win it this year, but hasn't quite gone to plan. Obviously, it's difficult against someone as dominant as Alonso, but you know, he definitely left a lot of points on the table by being quite inconsistent.
I feel the battle for second was three riders that were pretty inconsistent because, again, Artola on his day is a race winner, same with Fire and same with Holgado. So it was just who could be the most consistent over the last kind of running. And you could probably make arguments for all of them that they all probably should have had second in the world. For me, if I had to probably pick a rider who's been best this season, I probably would have said Vire. I probably would have went Vire, Holgado, and Artola. I think Artola is very hot and cold. I think he's worse than the two of them in terms of how hot he can burn versus how cold he can go in a weekend, and you just don't see him. I think Vire has been the most consistent, but he's had just kind of a small dip. That's just where he's just lost a second for the championship for me. Whereas I think Holgado, even though he's been a bit of a yo-yo, I still think he's just managed to make the difference when it counts. But for me, Holgado, I don't think you could be too disappointed when you're being beaten by a guy who's broken pretty much every record in the Moto 3/1-5 class. When you're taking records off Valentino and Marquez, you can't really be too disappointed that you've been kind of the floor has been wiped with him and stuff. So overall, I think, look, he's had two good seasons. We could probably call it Moto 3. He's going up to Moto 2, and I'm hoping he can kind of kick on there. He's a bit of a question mark for me of how far can he go. He kind of reminds me of Tony Arbolino, that he was never the star of his class. And I feel like when Arbolino got that season the first kind of half season against Acosta where he really shone, I think we could see something from Holgado like that, but I just hope he doesn't taper off the way Arbolino has. I just feel that when Arbolino's in the sniper scene back, probably 2017, 2018, 19, maybe even later, I'm not too sure now. Probably 2020, 2019 if I had to guess. But
yeah, I think 20 was his last year, because I think he lost the championship because he sat next to someone on a plane, didn't he, like COVID or something?
Yeah, so he was one of those guys that was kind of always there about, but he wasn't the star of a Moto 3 class, and he was always good, and he showed speed. And when he moved up to Moto 2, I was kind of like, yeah, look, he'd probably be a good top 10 rider, but I never expected to see him go head-to-head with Acosta. I didn't think that was in him. And I think we could see something similar to Holgado when he moves up. We could potentially see another gear from him, and I kind of hope him, because I think, again, on his day, he really shows he's very good, and obviously he's after being in a couple of good teams in Moto 3 for the period he's been there. So the fact that he's had a good run at it in Moto 3, there's obviously people around him and people in them teams that have seen something in him. So there must be something there, and he's moving up to Moto 2 with a good season again. To be the first loser to Alonso is probably not the best way to look at it, but to be best of the rest after being dominated by a generational talent in Alonso, I think it's a good way to end your season, really. And I think beating who I thought was better for the season, Vire, beating him and beating Artola, I think is a good scalp to have in your CV moving up.
Yeah, I am actually surprised that Vire didn't end up coming out on top, because when I think of the season, I do remember him being more of the threat, but I feel like he has crashed more probably than the rest. Ortola and Holgado have had weekends where they've been a bit anonymous, but I don't know, Holgado especially hasn't crashed much, obviously, aside from Sepang, really. So yeah, it's I think it probably does show that maybe he has disappeared, but sometimes maybe it's better to disappear than push for the top front positions and crash out trying. So yeah, like you say, can't be too disappointed, because it was an absolute dominant performance with the guy that obviously beat him. Moving up to Moto2 now, going to be alongside that same guy, so I suppose that maybe is a little bit of a kick in the teeth, but also lots of good data to look at for next year. But the actual race itself, it's kind of the championship summed up with those two, the main two positions. I didn't think personally it was as chaotic as what you typically get at Catalunya. Obviously, there were some moments. Obviously, Munoz was towards the front, so it was always going to be a bit interesting. Who did he leave out the way? Was it Yamanaka on the last lap? He just rammed him off. Adrian Fernandez was up there, pulling some aggressive passes. Then he took his shortcut at turn 1 and just kept it pinned anyway, and ended up getting a 3-second penalty. So, yeah, there was some elements of chaos to the race, but I find that a lot of the time, and there was obviously a big pack for a lot of the race, 17 riders, but there wasn't as much of the slipstream 5-6 wide down towards turn 1 that we've seen in previous years at Catalunya, or I always remember the Jeremy Alcoba year where he was in the lead and he just literally sat up and looked behind him because he didn't want to lead over the line, and it was just what are you doing, mate? It was ridiculous. It didn't seem to be as much, didn't seem to happen like that this year, and I can't remember exactly how the original Catalunya race this year played out, but I feel like it was a bit more towards that way. So yeah, I did find that maybe it wasn't the typical Catalunya race that you get in Moto3.
I probably put that down to temperatures. I'd say first race of a Sunday morning. Sunday was the warmest of the 3 days, but still first thing, I think 11 o'clock is around the time that they race. It would be 10 for us. So you're still pretty much morning time, late kind of morning. So temperatures definitely be down. And yeah, I just think that end probably championship's done. I'd say a lot of people are there was a lot of disappointing rides over the season for a lot of people, and I think today kind of summed it up where we didn't have a crazy race because I don't think many people were that up for it. We had a few at the front. We had a couple going for P2, P3, P4 in the world, for example. You have your few riders that would probably walk into an airplane and try and have a battle with people in the line with them. Your Munoz and stuff, that everything in life is probably is some sort of a challenge to him, so he still made a big race of it. I think the two Leopards went hard at it again because of the previous history, but I just felt, it was not a dull race is the wrong way to say it, because it's still good entertaining. It's still good to see Alonso drop back, maintain, and then come back forward, and seeing other bikes battle. But I do agree, it wasn't a classic from Moto3 standard. It was much more tame, but I think the temperatures, I think a lot of people were just thinking we'll have to build into this race, we'll have to bring the race, will have to come to us. And I think, I'd say a lot of people probably just, the race came and went for them, and that was it really. There wasn't much really happened for a lot of people, and we kind of got gaps and stuff. And I think maybe take out the battle at the front, there probably wasn't a whole lot happening. Maybe further back, you probably always see battles for the last few points. There's always people probably putting moves on back there, but unfortunately on the live coverage you don't see much of that really. So yeah, it was a decent race. It's kind of summing, probably not for Moto3, but sums up my season of enjoyment in racing. It's not been a classic season. We can probably talk more about the actual overall summary of the season in a bit, but today wasn't a classic race. It was still good at the front, but it wasn't the usual big slipstream city that we expect from Catalunya with that real long straight and long hanging corners. But I just think the early morning cold temperatures this time of year, last race of the season, not a lot up for most people. So I'd say people wasn't one of those races where people were probably willing to put it on the line as much.
So on to Moto2 then, and coming from Moto3, where we said the race wasn't particularly chaotic, Moto2 started off in quite a hectic start. So we had, on the run into turn 1, Jake Dixon kind of blew his braking point. I think he nearly hit somebody at the back, had to sort of bail out, go across the shortcut. Obviously he was starting towards the front, was trying to have a good race for his last one in the Aspar team, so you knew he was going to try and push in there. Made that mistake. Then cuts about 4 corners later, you see him and Navarro flying through the gravel. Dixon's still on his bike at that point, Navarro not. That was 2 riders down straight away. Bit of an incident at turn 5. Looked like Dixon was trying to go up the inside of a few riders. Contact with Lopez, lost his mudguard, then basically his bike, whilst he was still trying to ride it, basically just cutting into Navarro. And there was also one of the wildcard riders that crashed as well at that turn. There was Garcia, not Sergio Garcia, it was the other Garcia. So that was the first lap. So that was 2 incidents already in the space of that short period of time. Then I think at the start of the second lap it was down towards turn 1 we had the 2 IO bikes go side by side, Onshu and Vietti alongside along with Zonta van der Gerberg, who had obviously had a really good qualifying, starting 3rd place and was still at that point hanging on in a decent position. sort of it all closed up as Onshu moved over a little bit. Zonta gets it a bit wrong, goes into the back of Vietti. They both go down. A pretty nasty crash that one was. I'm glad to see that. I think everyone was relatively okay from that one, and it just seemed like everything was happening on those first couple of laps. Like a few different weird incidents. Like obviously the turn 5 one was a bit strange. That one down towards turn 1 was strange, but it seemed like they kind of knew they needed to make hay while the sun shined. And the first few laps, the grid was a little bit shook up as well. In Moto2, it was a bit strange, so perhaps maybe that's why there was a few riders out of position or making bad starts, but it did seem like it was a bit of a aggressive, hectic start with some of those weird incidents happening.
Yeah, I was. I'd be interested. I know we probably both agree there were a bit strange incidents, but I will come back after this point. I'll kind of throw back to you to see who do you think is at fault in both cases. But again, it's one of those. So if you remember to the previous races here, always Barcelona is a real tire killer in the Moto2 class and in pretty much all classes. But I think a lot of people knew early that they had to make good track position to get settled in, to kind of build into the race so that they could have a chance of going forward. So I think there was probably a bit of tension, I'd say, in people in maybe the top 10, top 15 in the early lap to try and get that bit of track position early, so that when the tyre dropped, they didn't have to use more tyre to get across to people that were slightly up the road. So I'd say that was probably a bit in it too. For me, the Dixon one, he takes a very aggressive line. Look, he makes a mistake into turn 1. It's a long run. You're going downhill into turn 1. You can happen. You can make the mistake into turn 1. Turn 1 is always one of the more tricky parts of the race again. So makes a mistake, runs off, whatever, joins back up. Into the turn 5, though, I feel like he's really good. He goes straight for the apex. He dives to the apex. And Alonso Lopez comes back and obviously just catches the front of Jake. I don't feel... A lot of times I'd be probably critical of Alonso Lopez there, but I feel like Alonso didn't do much wrong because he kind of takes the natural racing line. Jake just kind of appears on the apex pretty late. I don't know if you agree with that, but with the other incident with the Onshu, Vietti and Zonta, I just felt it was a bit of a messy one. Obviously, you can see Vietti is the one in front. You have Zonta pretty much directly behind in slipstream, and then Onshu to the right of Zonta on the way in. And Onshu just slowly move across, but I still think that Zonta... to be honest, I've only seen it once or twice, so maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but I think he probably could get it stopped still and maybe avoid the collision. It seems like maybe he's being pushed up onto the curb and he releases the brake and had that creates that bit of run on that then ends up in the back of it and a bit of slipstream and that kind of, again, we're talking about hundreds of seconds here and these split decisions that can make or break a race here. So that was probably a bit more harder to call, but I do think that maybe Jake was probably a bit fired up straight away. The fact he made a mistake into 1 and then just trying probably a bit over the aggressive, because again he has history at this track. He has won here before. Again, if we go back, was it 20? It was last year. It was in 23 when he won, beat Canet. So he has history of having good results here. So and didn't he this year didn't he get his first podium of the year here?
Year? And I think he got I don't know if he got his first podium ever in Moto2 here as well. So
yeah, so he obviously has good. Yeah, he's probably at this point he's one of the better riders on tyres, so he's kind of known for having good races here. So he's probably eager to get back through. But I just feel he's probably more at fault for me being that aggressive so early on. I think again just that bit of frustration crept in because he's had a poor run. His flyaways were poor, and he wants to obviously again, like I said, he is leaving that team this year or at the end of the year, so he is gone from them now. So he definitely wants to send off with a good chance at maybe taking it on the podium. But just with the Zonta, the Onshu and Vietti one, I'd be interested to see what you think. But I just feel like maybe I'm being a bit harsh on Zonta, but I just feel like maybe could have done slightly better to avoid contact. It does get pretty hectic when Onshu moves across, but like surely you can kind of see that like he's not going to go down the inside white line. Surely you can kind of see he's going to move back to the racing line at some point on the inside. So maybe be just a bit more cautious early in the race.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with both of your assessments there. To be honest, with both incidents, I feel like it was Dixon more at fault into turn 5. He went for a very aggressive pass. Lopez is in front. Okay, yeah, he's cutting back a little bit, but that's kind of the line in that corner. You know, when you're making a pass at the inside, you've got to kind of make sure you're not ramming it up the inside. Basically, if the front of your bike's hitting the back of somebody else's, you're probably at fault because you can kind of see what's happening. If they were more level, then you could say maybe it's a bit more like, you know, he should have been seen by Lopez, but yeah, for me, I think that was with Jake. I kind of agree that it was probably, he's quite an emotional character, isn't he? He does, so probably was a bit fired up. He wanted to have a good race for them. He'd had a good start. He'd kind of done the hard part. He kind of messed up the braking into turn one. Then was probably thinking that, like you said earlier, that it matters so much to get those positions to settle in Moto 2, especially the way this played out. It was much more like a bit of a Dunlop race until towards the end, where they were sort of running on the canvases. But to be fair, even here, I think the Dunlops used to do that. So yeah, for me, I think he was just being quite aggressive, trying to make up the positions, which makes sense. It was the right kind of thing to do, but I think he just was a bit over optimistic on that occasion. And yeah, I think he was sort of the not the total cause, because I think it wasn't like it came from Mars back and wiped out loads of people. It was still a bit of a racing incident, but I do feel like being the rider behind, he was really the responsible one to avoid it. And I guess by that same token, the Zonta incident with the two IR boys, rider behind, Scott has to try and avoid the incident. And I don't want to be harsh on him either, but it's not the first time that we've questioned his decision making in these split second moments. I mean, remember, was it Mandalika turn 1 when he rode into the side with Masia, bit of a penalty then. Obviously, there was the incident in the pit lane with Arbolino. I guess you could kind of say a similar thing, where it's a split second decision trying to slow down. Which side do you go? And he picked the wrong side, and he kind of seemed to do the same thing again here, where he kind of picked. I don't think he probably could have gone to the inside, but perhaps he should have picked up and gone off circuit, I suppose, into turn 1 instead of trying to still pull it down if he thought he was going to struggle to get it stopped. But it's easy for us to say, I suppose, sat on the settee, watching the race rather than being on the bike. But there's maybe a little bit of a pattern there. Now, of course, he probably was slightly out of position compared to where he normally is. So, in his defence, he perhaps hasn't raced a lot with Vietti and Onshu. Wasn't exactly sure what they were doing, but still, as the rider behind, it's your responsibility to avoid the contact. So, yeah, I suppose it's a bit boring to just agree, but yeah, I pretty much agree with your assessment on those two incidents, to be honest. So that was the start of the race anyway. Started off, it did calm down a little bit after that one, and we had the pole man, who actually had a pretty bad start himself and was able to come back through, Aaron Canet. He really has started to suss this out, this whole winning thing, hasn't he? He's started to sort of get the hang of it again, pretty much the second half of the season, or since the flyaways. Definitely, he's been the fastest guy pretty much week in, week out. The odd weekend where he was a bit anonymous, I can't remember where he was in Sepang. I feel like he was a bit off there, but every other round he's pretty much been there, battling, being top of the practice sessions, battling for the pole position, battling for the win. And we've seen races in the past like this where Canet has been stunningly fast all weekend, has got pole position, had a bad start and then not recovered from it, or had a bad start, fought his way back through like he did today, but then ran out of tyre because he's pushed too hard to get back through. But no, he sort of clinically made his way through. Really impressive. Made a couple of different passes actually at the last corner, which is obviously the famous Rossi pass. I don't know whether it's now the nature of the bikes, maybe the tyres being so good, but that pass seems to get pulled quite a lot these days. Obviously, it was quite rare then. I mean, it was a complete shock when it was pulled, even though he had actually done it before, as most people tend to forget. Did it a couple of seasons before, but that seemed to be like the pinnacle pass back in the day. But I saw that happen quite a few times this weekend in the lower classes. I guess maybe it's because it's so hard on a GP bike. Maybe that's more of it. But yeah, he pulled a good couple of passes there. And there was one lap where he went past about 3 different riders in a few different corners. So yeah, Canet's form towards the end of the season has been fantastic. Another win for him. And, he'd already secured the runner-up spot in the championship before starting this round. But surely, we've got to say at this point, surely Aaron Canet's got to be the favourite for the championship next year, because the only person that's beaten is moving up. The form he's been on at the end of this season, there is not a big change coming next year for him or the class. Obviously, last year, we thought Aldeguer was going to be the favourite based on his form at the end of the season. Obviously, the tyre change, that's made a big difference to the class, and obviously has affected Aldeguer a bit. But going into next year, we're sticking with the same Pirelli tyres. Canet staying with the same team. That team is staying with the same chassis. That team is staying with the same suspension. So there doesn't seem to be anything massive changing for Canet. So does he now go into next year as the favourite? I think he does.
I'd agree. I was thinking this during the race when he was 2 seconds the second half of the road, and I was thinking, there's no way on the podcast that I'm going to say Aaron Canet's the favourite for the championship next year after what he's done in the last 7-8 years in Grand Prix racing. But you can't argue with it though, because he's, like, if you go back as far as Qatar, right, he kind of, again, everyone was fresh. Nobody had a clue what was going on with them tyres. Nobody knew how to ride them. They didn't know how to get the most out of them over 1 lap or 30 laps. So it was always going to be weird. But he was fast There was no question. Right, he shredded his tire, but he's been fast everywhere we've gone. There's been there's someone's going to point out the one race where he's probably sixth the whole race weekend and didn't show up. But like if we went back through the practice sessions of every race weekend this season so far, he's been quick everywhere. And I don't mean that he's been there about a lot of the times he's been the quickest man. Again, pole position again today takes the win. Makes it probably a bit harder at the end. He shredded a bit of tire, but I think we could probably both agree that's probably one thing he still maybe needs to just fine tune is his tire management. It was something I felt like he wasn't particularly great at the best of times on the Dunlops either, but obviously still first season, so still a bit of learning to do. I think next year when we go back to some of these tracks, for example, this is the first track we went back to for the second time, we'll say, with the same tires. So I think that might have played into some of why Moto3 and Moto2 races were maybe a bit different, because they had a bit of a baseline of them tires at that track, some understanding. But you can't really argue with it, like, because Igor, look, he missed one race. He only missed the Austrian Grand Prix. He didn't miss anything else after the hand injury. Like you can't really say that Canet has been a poor season. He's made his typical Canet mistakes throughout the season. Mizano last corner was the one that we were probably very harsh on him for.
That was really poor though. It only cost him 5 points, so I suppose it wasn't that bad in terms of points stricken away, but it was poor.
Yeah, that just shows a little bit of was naivety, to be honest. But the last 6-7 races he's been I think since Silverstone or Aragon he's scored the most points in the championship. So
probably because he crashed at Aragon, didn't he? But he was second at Silverstone just before. So yeah. So he's been absolutely bulletproof, and I'm actually really excited for his 25 season because Aldeguer's moving up, so Aldeguer's not going to get his stuff together in Moto2 and go after another title. Dixon is a question mark. I expected more from Dixon this year. Of course, new tyres, new suspension, had a bit of a good run. I do believe he lost his crew chief midway through the season. There was just I saw something on TNT. Yeah,
about
I saw that.
There was
I hadn't heard that before, but apparently sounds like.
I did. So that might explain something, because again, the connection between the rider, the bike, and the crew chief, that little triangle there is incredibly integral to a rider and team success. But again, it's one of those things where he then later in the season got his old crew chief from the Petronas team, and that seemed to kind of galvanise him again to kind of go again. He seemed to find a bit more form in the last bit, a bit of a rise, but he's a rider. He's a bit of a question mark for me, Dixon, mainly just because of his flyaways. I think he's had a really good, again, I hold nothing against him for the opening part of the season. He crashes big, and Qatar comes back with the injury. He's behind the 8-ball with the tyres and the suspension, and he's making mistakes. Fair enough, the bike's just not working. I completely understand. I hold nothing against him for that, but when he starts kind of getting there, and he had a very good season, and we did sit here, it was probably around Silverstone, or after that, it's like, could he continue this run and go on and maybe fight for the title with, at the time, probably would have been Garcia and Igora. But his flyaways have just, again, maybe that is the exact time where he lost his crew chief and he just lost his way slightly, but I felt he kind of resorted back to his type of going over his limit too early in the race, crashing a couple of times needlessly. So that just kind of dampened the idea of him maybe becoming a champion next year. I believe he has the talent and he should have the temperament to be able to do it. He's been in the class long enough now. He's a multiple race winner, and he's been at the front of the class for long enough now, and he's going into a team I would have called a premier team in that class, but of late, I'd nearly feel that team have maybe lost their way. Obviously, this season has been shocking for them. They had a good run last year with the Costa and Arbolino battle. They were in that, but they were kind of on the pummel again to that side, really, unfortunately. But like, I wouldn't say they, like, when's the last time Mark VDS won the title? Augusto? No, he was in the Red Bull. So yeah, that's
2014.
14?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a decade.
Yeah, so like as much as they've been there.
Oh no, Alex Marquez, 19.
Oh, 2019, yeah.
Oh yeah, because I also forgot Morbidelli. Yeah, I'm not.
Morbidelli was 16, wasn't he?
Yeah, Morbidelli was.
He was 17.
He was 17. His first year was 16. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
They battled for it in 17.
So,
yeah, and then Alex Marquez won it in 19. Yeah, that's what it was.
But yeah, that's a bit better. But that kind of backs up the point that's like we're going into 25 now, so it's been 6 years since they've brought home a title. If how many titles has Aki Aya won in that period of time?
Well, he'd won like the last. He'd won all of them since like 2020, hadn't he? Like he'd won 21, 22, 23. He'd won
VR 46.
three in a row. VR 46
No, that was
only won
before
with
it.
Pecco, didn't they?
That was 18, wasn't it?
Yeah.
18, then they went to the triumphs in 19 Marquez. 20 was Bastianini.
Yeah, that was the sort
21.
Yeah, and then it was Io since
Okay.
then, wasn't it? Because 21 was Gardner, 22 was Fernandez, and then 23 was Acosta.
Yeah, so they've had a good run of it this year. Maybe not being perfect this year, but I'd be another surprised to see them not be strong. But just back to the Mark VS point, I just slowly, like, it can take a couple of years, and the team then can just start fading into the midfield. And again, they have the Moto World Superbike team even, so maybe they've just been strayed slightly with maybe some funding's gone that way. Some of the better equipment and the manpower has maybe gone that way. But yeah, it'd be interesting with Dixon. But to kind of go back to finishing up with Canet, I think for right now, if I had to put my money on it, I want to be him for the 25 title.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think it'd be hard to bet against him because, like you say, he has been pretty good this season. I mean, he's only 20 odd
He
points.
stopped
behind
crashing
Agora.
as well. That was a huge thing for me.
Yeah,
he was crashing.
He's had the odd crash, but then you do have the odd crash over a season. It's
yeah,
exactly. Especially Moto 2, it's so close. And so I think really what cost him was he just disappeared mid-season a little bit. There's that little period, sort of second, third of the season, like the middle part of the season. He kind of was, because the start of the season he was good. So he won at Portimao. I did hear them say on TNT that he missed Jerez. I actually can't remember that at all. But I believe it probably did happen. So he probably missed a race there for an injury. I kind of don't remember seeing him much again till Silverstone.
I think didn't he crash on a wet patch?
Oh, he might have done.
In the just going into it was at the left hander before the infield section. I'm fairly sure he got a wet patch.
Yeah, I think he did because did it happen in a practice session, didn't it? Yes, because then did he like hurt his leg?
Yeah, that was that. And then he came back and he was a bit injured. So yeah, that's his title charge gone there. Like, because he was over 40 points off of Ayagora. Yeah. He loses 16 points there alone. Has a bit of an injury, bit of a knock-on effect. Takes a while to get the confidence back. That's 30 points gone there. And then you're a lot closer. And then maybe he's in the title hunt then. Like, so that just that mistake there, that little bad luck there, that could be the difference between his season. Like, so yeah. Interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, it was definitely his most solid season. We can certainly say that, and it looked really promising, and against some good riders on the grid as well. So yeah, we'll have to see. It does seem like the Calix will probably be the form bike as well. I know the Bosco Scuro has won the championship this year, but it's been fairly clear the second half of the season the Calix has fought back, and the Bosco Scuro has not been what it was. I think sounds like they're going to be 4 extra Bosco Scuros on the grid next year, so maybe the extra data will help, but. Yeah, we'll have to see. So, yeah, Canet probably is in that prime position because he's staying in the same place. Good bike, good form. And, yeah, it'll be interesting to see who could take it to him. And maybe one of the guys that could take it to him was the guy trying to take it to him today, Manuel Gonzalez. Again, actually secured third in the championship today, which you don't...
That was a shock.
Yeah, it is a surprise, isn't it? Because he's not had a bad season by any means, but he's kind of been a bit anonymous. He had a couple of podiums earlier on in the season, and you kind of were like, oh yeah, Manu could be a potential championship challenger at this point, because this was back in the point where Joe Roberts was on leading the championship, and Garcia was a different time, was a very, very different time. And, then since then he kind of disappeared. He won the race in Motegi, which, was a great ride by him, but of course it was condition sort of helped, because there was the tyre gamble. I mean, he obviously beat all the guys on the slicks, but there was only about 6 or 7 of them. So it always makes it a bit easier in that circumstance because there's less people to beat. And then obviously he battled Agora for the win, but Agora had a lot more to lose than Gonzalez did. And Gonzalez actually almost lost his job after, but that's a different story, I suppose. But yeah, he's moving to Intact GP next year. Could potentially be a bit of a shout, but good race for him again today. He always used to go quite well at Catalonia. I seem to remember last year we were talking about him on the VR 46 Mastercamp bike doing quite well here, and then he faded because his tyre ran out, and he looked like he ran out of tyre at the end as well today, because he was catching Canet and then all of a sudden stopped catching Canet, and it was but like he also then hit the wall, which was obviously not great for him. Obviously didn't allow us to have a grandstand finish. He couldn't quite get close enough. But I think overall, good ride from him again today. Good season from him as well overall, and well, yeah, this was a good season for them in the world, but I think we expected perhaps a bit more from him. I think we expected maybe a couple more wins, more podiums and stuff, but consistent. You know, he didn't crash a lot. He was always there or thereabouts, I guess. He must have always been floating around top 10, and obviously has sort of benefited from the mixed season of some of the riders that probably did do better than him on their good days, but had pretty bad days. But yeah, I think decent weekend for him certainly this weekend, and obviously he's going to be pretty happy with third in the world, I would have thought. Hopefully he can build on that next year, because I think it could be these two guys, maybe not the only guys, but they could certainly be fighting for the championship.
Yeah, I think you've nailed the head there with just his season, because like as you were saying, as I saw it today, because at the start of the race it was Garcia third, Aldeguer behind, and I was thinking, but Aldeguer still has that long knock to tape, and he's probably still suffering from the injury. So I say, I imagine Garcia will hold on. So like Gonzalez was just not in the picture at all for me. He didn't even cross my mind he was there. If you had asked me before the race started, I'd probably said, yeah, he's probably about seventh. And then when I saw as the race panned out, and then you kind of think, how has that happened? But then it's quite easy. It's very easily. I'm going to explain in the next 10 seconds. You're going to understand. Joe Roberts did half a season. Aldeguer tried his best to kill everyone and crash every race. Dixon did a quarter of a season. Arbolino did 2 races. Vietti did 3 races. If you kind of look through the guys who've had higher points in the season, they've done nothing for the rest of the year. Like, I genuinely can't remember the last time I saw Joe Roberts on screen. It definitely was before he got injured in the flyaways at some point, but he's done so little since the Aprilia snub. I cannot remember someone go from being such a consistent, looking unbelievable on that Calyx. He was the only man at the start of the season doing anything on the Calyx, and like, where did he end up in the championship? Nowhere. It was a shocking second half of the season, I suppose. It was summer on, really. It was when it all kind of went pear-shaped.
Assen onwards, wasn't it, really? Basically, he won at Mugello, and then after that, season was terrible after that.
Yeah, high side in Assen. Didn't he crash out in Silverstone as well, I believe?
Yeah, out of a good position. And then he found out he'd lost the trackhouse ride around about that time as well.
Yeah, then Aragon happened, and downhill.
That was the last time I remember seeing him, was Aragon, crashing trying to beat his teammate. I really remember seeing him after that.
Yeah,
more of Navarro, like, in that period than him.
Yeah, I'm thinking back. I'm thinking of that team, and I just remember talking about Navarro and how well of a job he's done. But again, you look at Vietti; he was very up and down. Again, his high points were higher than Gonzalez's, but just nowhere for their season. Arbolino, I wouldn't even say his high points were better. He had Misano. That was it. What else did he really do for the year? Not much. He had a couple of races
pretty good at
in the
Aragon,
top 6.
Wasn't he? He was like second there, I think.
Yeah, so again, an odd podium, but it's nowhere for the season. And again, Dixon, we've seen he's obviously he was handicapped from the start of the season it was 4 straight DNFs before he started scoring points, so he's already the equivalent of 100 points back on everyone else, so it was going to be really tough for him to do it. But he had done a great job up till we went to the flyaways, and then that all fell apart. So again, Gonzalez winning in Motogp. Just absolutely. I don't want to say that I expected more from him, because the fact he ended up third in the world and was really consistent, that's kind of what you want from a rider. I'm just hoping that Intac is good enough squad. I feel, again, I think we very much said last year that he made a bit of a sideways step in the team, is what we were hoping that wouldn't happen. I'd probably say it's kind of happened, maybe half a step forward. The Intac team, would you say that's a step forward on the Gresini team? I would, by no means would I say it's a championship winning team in my eyes, but at the same time, would you say Fantech's a championship winning team? Probably not. So maybe we're seeing a change of the guard.
It was a VR46 team previously, so maybe.
True. Yeah, that's true.
There's at least some pedigree there. I get what you're saying. Like, I agree with the point, but yeah.
If we go back through, we'll just take the Intact team. Go back through last 5 years. What would you say their stand-up moment would be?
Last 5 years, like they've kind of always been a there or thereabouts team, haven't they?
That's kind of it though. But you could say the same about Gresini.
Yeah. Sam Lowe's had a good season with them. Di Giannantonio won a race with them. That's about it, really.
Exactly. They've kind of like maybe
they've had some really bad
seasons
over the years with like a nobody on the bike as well. So yeah.
So again, I just feel that he's not in a particularly strong team. Not a top tier team is what I'd say. More.
Is there really any top tier teams in Moto2 anymore though, aside from maybe IO? Because like you say, Mark BDS haven't won a championship in 6 years.
Yeah, true. I suppose.
like
Yeah,
you look at
I'd say the factory Bosco Score is probably one of the premium outfits in my eyes.
But they've never won
I just
anything,
think
really.
they've not won anything, but I feel like they have just, especially since they've in the time where that chassis has come to the front. I feel like they've had two very hot and cold riders in Aldeguer and Lopez.
That's true.
I think
that's true. But they've always been very hot
I've
and
been
cold
very critical
as a team, though. So there is that.
Yeah,
You remember
yeah. I suppose. Yeah, you could.
Quartararo, he's not hot and cold, but he definitely was when he was on that bike. So yeah.
Yeah, I suppose we need to think as well that Moto 2 is a set class where same engine, pretty much half the field has one chassis, and we're probably slowly moving to nearly a 50-50 split, which would be nice if we got a 50 split between Calyx and Bosco Scores. Of course, we still have the forward bikes, but well, they're not really doing much, unfortunately, in the class. Same electronics, so there's very little to split them, so it doesn't take much for a team to probably fall a bit back a bit. So yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully, I am hopeful because I am a fan of Manu, so I hope he can push on. I can remember saying these exact words last year when he was signed for Cassini, that I was kind of maybe just unsure if that team was good enough for him, but he's won a race this year, third in the world. If he can kick on and just make another step and just maybe be a bit more consistently on the podium or in the podium hunt, instead of being top 8, top 6 most weeks, try and be top 4, top 3 every week. I know that's a hard ask in Moto 2, but if you want to put in a championship challenge, I think that's the next step for him.
Yeah, I think so. And like you say, obviously, you can't be too disappointed with third in the world, but any other year, this kind of season is probably like 8th. It's not really
100%.
Like you say, you've listed off so many riders that have had terrible seasons. To me, like Dixon stands out. He's probably, I don't know the stats exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has as many DNFs as he has finishes, like a 50-50 split, because like you say, he didn't score for the first 5 races. Then he crashed out of most of the flyaways, crashed out again today. You could say the same for like Aldeguer, probably. Maybe not quite as extreme, but he certainly crashed in a lot of races. Lopez the same, I guess, hot and cold. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to see next year, but that was got to be the goal. Surely it's got to be fighting for more regular podiums and occasional victories, or at least if you want to put any kind of title fight together. But somebody else that had a pretty good race today was Diogo Moreira, and also secured another championship position, the Rookie of the Year. It was 1 point separating him and Senna Aegis going into this final round of the season. And I'm surprised it's so close, because I kind of would have thought that, I suppose Aegis' podium probably helped him out a lot on that front, because I would have thought that I saw more of Moreira this year than Aegis, but then also Moreira faded a lot in a lot of the races, so maybe that's why. But he got his first podium of the season, first podium in Moto2 today. I think he's had a solid rookie season, the kind of season you'd expect from a rider. I mean, he's in Italtrans, which isn't by no means a bad team, but again, would you say it's a Premier team? Obviously, yes, they won the season with Bastianini, but it was a very strange season, so it's not like it's a consistent thing. But I remember when Passini was always there, they were occasional sort of fighting for the victory for the podium, but they were never a serial week in, week out team. But a really good race for him today. Again, he seems to work well at these low grip tracks. Obviously, he's a Supermoto rider, a very, very good Supermoto rider at that. So it probably does help out. But the low grip tracks, where it's a bit of tyre wear, he has been quite good there. He was quite good at Aragon. I think he did fade a little bit. Saxon where you're on the edge of the tyre the whole time, he was pretty good there. But yeah, today he had a battle with the champion, Iagora. They went back and forth a few times. It looked like Agora had put the manners on him into turn 10, but Moreira did the famous final corner pass as well and took the podium. I think, to be fair, good race for him. I think decent rookie season. Be good to see what he could do next year. Obviously staying put where he is, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, be good to see, can he make that step up. Obviously he'll be the real team leader now in that team, with Dennis Fodger vacating. I think he probably basically was the team leader from fairly early on anyway with the results, but he certainly will be the actual team leader, because it'll be a rookie coming alongside him with Huertas, who he's no slouch, so that'll be an interesting matchup, I'm sure. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Moreira does next year, because good season this year. I think he can certainly build on it. Don't know if he'll be a title contender necessarily, but I would certainly expect at least a race win next season with the form he's on, and probably a couple more podiums, which I guess is all you need to be a championship contender. But I think he'll be probably one of those guys that just gets the odd win and just is there or thereabouts in most of the weekends.
Yeah, a decent season. Again, Moto2 being probably the most difficult class to go into. But a lot of people tipped him because he's a well, it's a bit like Remy Gardner. The more horsepower you give him, the more you can kind of control the bike and manipulate it in his own way. And he does like the bike sideways. And when the tyre drops today, he was very, very strong. And Igor is probably one of, if not the best guys on managing a tyre. And it looked like he got outmanaged today by the Brazilian. And I think probably Moreira's probably tipped to go all the way to GP. I think being Brazilian as well, having that passport would be great to get a Brazilian back in the class. We haven't had a Brazilian since probably when it was Barris 2007. Was Barris last year? 2006? Was he there that late?
2006, something like that. Yeah, it would have been like that on a period of time. Yeah, Pramac was it or something like that.
Yeah, Pramac. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think again he just seems to suit a bigger bike. So I think probably a matter of time before maybe a Grassini in another couple of years might take a punt on him or someone like that. Where maybe one of the lesser teams. But yeah, he's very impressive rider. He was very impressive in Moto 3, but just felt like that class just didn't really suit his skill set. Whereas I think moving up now, when he has moved up with the improvements this year he's made, and I think another year under his belt, same team going back to tracks that you have a bit of data, a bit of understanding, I think that's a great help because you think of it really. You go to a racetrack of a Friday, you have basically 2 hours on a Friday, if that. We'll say an hour and a half by the time of actual track time. You have your kind of hour of a Saturday morning, then you're kind of getting prepped for qualifying, and then you go racing. You have so little time to dial a bike in to get close. So to be having double that coming back next year now and going again at a lot of these tracks where they have a very good understanding of what he needs from the bike underneath him, it'll be very interesting to see if he can kick on and become a very consistent top 5 rider. I am a fan of him. I like the way he's very, very much likes the bike sliders and stuff, and he's well able to control his sliding. I think that's very, very critical and a very good skill to have. That when the tyre does drop, that he can, like you see a lot of times the tyre drops and people just start moving around, they have no grip, whereas some of the more riders like Moreira, when the tyre does drop, they can control the slide with the lack of grip instead of it just having it pumping and sliding and all over the place. They can understand how the tyre drop and work with it better. I think he really showed that today in the long corners. He was really, like you saw Igor, a lot of times the bike was moving and kind of pumping and protesting, whereas it looked like that Moreira could just kind of consistently drift the bike and kind of manipulate it in the way he wanted around the track. So it's probably a decent season. Rookie of the year, I suppose, yeah. Aegis probably really only had that one good result in Phillip Island. One kind of standout result. He's been probably consistently a point scorer all year, really. But I suppose, yeah, I suppose if they are that close, it was probably either way. But very good result for him today, get the podium, and to be able to go out last race of the season and beat the outgoing champion into Motogp now, I think that's a real confidence booster. So I think next year we should see another step from it. Just again, I'm going to go back to the question mark of the team. Italtrans, we saw Roberts went there a couple of years, did nothing. Bastianini won in 20 as you mentioned, but that was a COVID year, so that was kind of the question mark year. For example, look what Mayer's done since. Frankie Morbidelli was there before he went to Mark VDS and went on to win a title, so they're probably a team where you can nearly leapfrog into a bigger team, but I'm hoping that I'm kind of hoping that he can kind of make a better season of it the next year, because I think a lot of times this year he just was a bit kind of anomalous, and we get to a track where it would really suit him and he'd make the difference and he'd be there. But I'm hoping next year just a bit more consistency, and I think there's no question the speed is there. It just needs to be brought out more consistently.
So on to the Premier class now then. MotoGP, of course, the only class where there was still a championship up for grabs going into this final round. Jorge Martin versus Pecco Bagnaia. Now, it was always going to be a bit of a long shot for Bagnaia, but for me, both of them did exactly what they needed to do this weekend. Bagnaia, to be fair, you got to say hats off to him, because it was a perfect weekend for him, pretty much, aside from a weird practice start crash, but, you know, I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. If you didn't see it, basically there's a practice start session they always have at the end of free practice for some reason. I don't really know why, but they always go back round and then do like a little practice start. Bagnaia had done his. He was then cruising down towards turn 1, almost on the racing line, but just off it. Vinales comes down basically at like, I don't know if it's quite full racing speed, but it definitely wasn't far off. Sort of goes round the outside of him into turn 1. Bagnaia kind of gets caught off guard by that, grabs his front brake, locks the front end, down he goes. It was a weird way to start his Friday on the end of a Friday morning, but didn't affect him. Other than that, he was faultless, wasn't he, all weekend. Pole position, I don't know if he got the fastest lap in both races. I don't know who keeps track of that kind of thing, but either way, don't think it really matters too much. He basically led, lights the flag in both races, didn't put a foot wrong, especially in the main race when he was under all the pressure from Marc Marquez. Obviously, in the sprint, he had a bit of a gap, so it was just a case of gap management. But yeah, I think Bagnaia, hats off to him this weekend. He did exactly what he needed to do, but equally so did Martin. Martin knew he did not have to beat Bagnaia. He just had to finish in a decent position in both races, and that's what he did. He finished on the podium, and that was good enough. All he needed in the main race was P9, and we have often seen people just wobble their way around to like ninth place. I remember Bagnaia a couple of years ago against Quartararo when he wobbled his way around to literally, he needed to finish like 14th or something, he finished like ninth. I mean, that one, as long as he didn't crash, was always going to be sort of a given, because Ducati had never won the championship, or hadn't won the championship since Stoner. They would have pulled every bike out of the way to allow him to do that one if he needed to, but he managed to do it on his own anyway, so it wasn't an issue. But yeah, he wobbled around, just about struggled. We've seen other seasons where similar things have happened, or in the lower classes where it's happened, where they've just about hung on to the position they need. But Martin actually didn't do that. He didn't look his normal self. He said he was approaching the weekend as normal, but as we saw, it clearly wasn't the case, with qualifying, trying to get a toe off a leash, and seemed a little bit shaky here and there. I think he certainly would have been closer on a normal weekend. But for me, they both did exactly what they needed to do. Unfortunately for Bagnaia, it wasn't really in his hands, so he did everything he could. But to be fair, I think they both actually handled it quite well and pretty much did the jobs that they needed to do coming into the weekend.
Yeah, pretty much spot on. Yeah, there's not much else to say other than the fact that Martin had a lot of margin. Pecco had a clear job to do, and he was able to probably do what he did today more often this year and make less mistakes. We'd be talking about 3-time GP champion, and we'd be comparing him to likes of Lawson, Lorenzo, and the other 3 times world champions out there doing and all them. So it's just the mistakes that have cost him. Pecco's made mistakes, whereas Martin has made some mistakes, but nowhere near as enough. It's been a brilliant season for both of them. If you want to reflect on the season now, they have been like head and shoulders ahead of everyone. Obviously, Marquez has threatened here and there throughout the season, and when things are very, I suppose, very up in the air, Marquez comes to the front. For example, Aragon, where he got his wins, and I suppose in Phillip Island, where one of those riders' tracks, he was able to make a difference. But for the most part, it's been Pecco and Martin have been the riders to watch really all year. I suppose the only thing, like coming into the weekend, everyone was trying to paint the idea of how could we have a title battle, how could it happen that we could get a some sort of drama that would maybe sway it in Pecco's favour. But really, the GP24 is so good. Martin is well able to just ride around a bit off the speed. Now, we've talked before about riders taking their foot off, just slightly edging back maybe to 95% and crashing. So it was still in the back of my mind that 5, 6, 7 laps to go that Martin in the main race, or the sprint for example, could have that small slip up into a turn 5 where he's braked a bit early, lost a bit of tyre temperature, lost a bit of contact patch, whatever, and gone down. So the fact he didn't make that mistake, and he was perfect all the race weekend in terms of getting what he needed done. He was very shaky throughout the race weekend, didn't look happy, really weird antics in qualifying to try and get a tow when he really didn't need it. That bike alone, even if he's not feeling it, he could still qualify like top 5 comfortably. It's just that bike is so good that he was never not going to be able to get the points. It was going to come down to a mistake, and he wasn't really going to make one. He didn't really make any mistakes I can remember in either the sprint or the main race. He was as good as he needed to be. He did exactly what he needed to do. Still at 10 points in the end over Pecco, so he had a bit of a margin. So yeah, he did the job, and again, fair play to Pecco. Pecco came in, had to win both races and hope for luck from the other side, and he didn't get it. And realistically, this was the race weekend we expected. It wasn't by any means a classic race weekend. This time of year, the grip levels being so low, cold temperatures, just there was car racing, like I said there last weekend, so the track wasn't in perfect condition. There was some weird racing lines and rubber down, and overall it was just a bit dirty. So the last minute changes going from Valencia up to Barcelona was another one. So again, it was just all a bit up in the air. So the fact that we kind of got a normal kind of just dull weekend was pretty good for Martin's sake. But Yeah, fair play to both riders. They did some very, very good stuff this year. Unfortunately, we had to have a loser, and this year it was Pecco.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it was not really decided here, was it? It was decided in the mistakes
Yep.
that came before. I mean, is that 11 victories for Bagnaia this season now, Grand Prix wins?
Yeah,
With today?
crazy.
I think he had 7 sprints, which is the same amount as Martin. So, I mean, it's the only time anyone's ever lost a championship by winning that many. But if you look at Bagnaia's, it's just his whole MotoGP career has been just filled with crashes throughout all the seasons. It just seems to be the way he goes about it. I mean, he has some flawless weekends like we saw this weekend. Assen, for example, Austria, for example. There's some weekends where he's just so dominant. I mean, you win 11 races in a season. It's because you are that good, you are that fast. But it's the weekends where he's not there. Martin's finishing second to him when he's doing this, whereas when Martin wins, he crashes. Or even some of the races where Bagnaia crashed, Martin himself didn't win. He finished second to like Bastianini or something, but he got the points and he did what he needed to do. There is the narrative that it was only really the sprints that made the difference, and I just don't. I think, yeah, okay, statistically you look at it a little bit. Obviously, if you take the sprint points away, that it did invert the gaps, but I don't think it really was necessarily the sprints because Bagnaia crashed out of plenty of main races too. It was just the number of mistakes he made that really ultimately. I mean, Martin wasn't faultless, but especially compared to last year, if you look at the amount of mistakes he made a lot less this year. Really, there was the 2 crashes, Jerez and Sachsenring. He obviously crashed in the sprint at Mugello. He crashed in the sprint at Indonesia as well, but to be fair, in Indonesia actually still got some points, I think. Or did he get points in the end? I can't remember.
He finished 10th and he was just outside the points, I think.
Yeah. But, that was a bit silly of him, but when you compare that to Bagnaia, I mean, you can think of, obviously he crashed in Portimao, which was contact with Marc Marquez, but for me that was still on him. But if you want to just talk about ones he did himself, obviously it was Mazzano. Sure, obviously it was the Sepang sprint race, so literally last weekend. There's plenty of other ones.
Silverstone sprint.
Yep, Silverstone sprint, which was a strange
France,
one.
he had a bike issue after a crash in qualifying. Spain crashed with Binder. Exactly. The Alex Marks incident, crashing in Emilia Romagna.
Yeah, so
that's enough. That's 3 years of Marquez crashes, or even 4 years of race crashes for Marquez or Rossi he's how old now? Is he 27?
Not
27. I'd love to compare him. I'm on his Wikipedia page, so I'm kind of more asking myself. So he's 27. So if you kind of take 27-year-old Casey Stoner, was a world champion, dominated that year. That was his last championship winning year, and
obviously there are more races now, so there is that element.
There is more races, true.
So you are going to have to allow for more crashes. If Rossi crashed once in his title winning season, you're going to have to maybe allow 2 or 3 now. But
but I'd like to probably make it a percentage because it's easier to understand percentage because that makes paints a better picture.
Could be an off-season podcast, maybe.
Yeah, I to be honest, I thought about doing it before, but we're both a bit pushed for time today, so I wasn't able to kind of get the figures. I'd love to kind of go through all the races that Pecco crashed out of and kind of make a chart of how many versus what we'll say. For example, just a 27-year-old Valentino or 27-year-old Stoner or
Marquez
Lorenzo or whatever, or like your late 20s. He's what I would class. You're in your prime years now. He's been in the class for long enough that he shouldn't really be. He's making rookie errors. Like the rookie errors this year has cost him. Just like 10 points is what it was in the end. 10 points. That's just one of them races where he's crashed out, finishing. Like when he finishes, he's either first, second, or third.
That's the Catalonian sprint. Last lap crash out of the lead. If you don't do that, you win the championship by 2 points. Well, actually, you might be slightly more because it also gives Martin less. But yeah, like that one.
It's just one of those. Yeah. The Emilia Romagna, the second Mazzano one, like that was just. I know there was a bit of a tire issue there.
3 seconds back. Why do you not just settle for third?
That surely a level right of that level can just back it off enough, and apparently he does back it off, and we're kind of getting things out towards the end of the season that apparently if you do back off with this new rear Michelin slick, that the extra grip it gives you somehow throws out the engine braking and takes load off the front, and heavy braking you can lock the front. So that's maybe a bit of an issue there. They need to look at for 25 that if you're not basically pushing the front, somehow taking weight off it makes it worse. So it's just shows how technical these bikes are. So again, it is easy to make mistakes, but he's made so many, and so many of them were pointless and needless. Like he's not. I haven't felt like he's like we'll say Jerez one for Martin. I felt like, all right, you're at the front of the race, you're pushing, you're probably not having the best weekend there, you're over the limit, you probably stay with them, you make a mistake. And it was one of those where first grab the brake, bike goes, very easily done, and you're kind of on your limit. Fair enough. Whereas like Pecco's mistakes aren't when he's battling tooth nail against Marquez, or he's up against it and he's in the rain and he's really having to make the difference. It comes when
he's perfect
doesn't
in
need to
those
make
races.
them.
It's so strange. Yeah.
It's just I can't imagine being an actual Pecco fan. You'd be pulling your hair out seeing him what he's able to do versus what ends up happening. And like, I have to praise this kind of nicely, but I feel he's fortunate to even have his 2 world titles, because both years he had very good run of the luck in terms of the Yamaha. Basically halfway through 22 was just non-existent and Fabio had nothing to fight with. Of course he went on a great run, had a winning race, taking great points, but when you're on a head and shoulders or better bike, your teammate is not a equal caliber rider. There was no Marquez that year. There was only the one Yamaha.
To
and that
ever
Yamaha
be
wasn't
92
working.
points behind really speaks for itself. Like, no one
Yeah,
ever
exactly.
like he came back for that fight was incredible, but he should never have been that far behind in the first place. I think that's
Exactly.
more of
Yeah.
the point.
And obviously he was the best rider last year, but then the injury, and he made it difficult for himself by making mistakes in India and just stuff like that. So and he got lucky last year. We could be talking about how Pecco's a one-time world champion now, and Martin's after wrapping up his second one, is on his way to factory Ducati, and Marquez is joining Pedro Costa on a KTM. How the world could have changed if these small things went away.
Yeah, it is a very, very strange one, but yeah, I think it's a season of mistakes. Like I said, I think it will be interesting maybe to delve into statistics, especially like we were saying, because it's not like this is one season where Bagnaia has had loads of crashes. If you look through every season he's had lots of DNFs, so clearly it wasn't really a thing that he did in the lower classes from what I remember, so
no, he was bulletproof in the lower classes. Yeah. It's something to do with the GP. I wonder it's just his feeling with the Michelin tyres.
Maybe
something that can
the
just
Ducati front end is still
with
maybe not good. There is
you
can put air on it, but if it's still bad at the end of the day, it's
True.
still kind of not very good. I mean, they still wish it turned more, so yeah, I guess
maybe he should be the one going to Aprilia. Maybe that could be
maybe that will be the way he'll have to go. I mean, maybe that will happen eventually. You never know. It depends if he gets forced out of the team by Marquez or whatever. Who knows what will happen in the future? But obviously, mentioning about Marquez there, may as well talk about him. Saturday, well, okay, the first part of Saturday for him was pretty good, starting quite high up. Sprint race, pretty much a write-off. He had contact with the Costa early on, dropped back to about 7th and then just stayed there. Seemed like, I don't know whether they picked up damage or what really happened, but didn't seem like he was able to recover from that incident. But on Sunday, I think they found a bit of something in warm-up, because to be honest, he'd been kind of nowhere all weekend until the qualifying. He kind of just got a tow from Bagnaia, and we've seen him. He can pull out a lap even when he's a bit off. Even on the Honda, he could pull out a lap and qualify well, which is why he did get a couple of sprint podiums the previous season from just qualifying well and then just being able to hang on. But yeah, it was in the race he was right there, and did see that the GP23 was a little bit better here because Alex Marquez was also performing quite well. Obviously Bezzecchi wasn't, but Bezzecchi struggled all year, and obviously Digi wasn't here, so it wasn't him on the bike, so we couldn't really compare. It was obviously Pirro instead, so it's harder to say exactly, but both the Marquezes were pretty fast in the race, so I guess it probably means the GP23 was a little bit closer maybe to the 24 here, but even still, he was running right on the back of Bagnaia, couldn't obviously make a pass, but again, just kind of sums up his season. A lot of them have been like this, where their final races summed up their season. Marquez just overperforming on the 23, fighting for the victory, managed to secure third place in the championship, which he claims not to care about, but he probably does a little bit, and it's going to be a bit more money in his bank account. He gets to go to the FIM ceremony this evening, get his bronze medal, so it's the first time he's been there for a few years, so it'll probably be nice for him. But yeah, I think again he had a very good Grand Prix. Weekend up until that point wasn't going too well, but I think again it just kind of shows how dangerous it's going to be. It's a track he doesn't like. He was struggling, and he still was right on the back wheel of Bagnaia on the year-old bike. So yeah, I think next year they could be in trouble. I guess we'll see on Tuesday a little bit what his first impressions of the 25 are. But yeah, if that's going to be as much of a step as the 24 was over the 23, then it's going to be only really one of two or three riders that can win races next year, and I know my money's on if that's the case.
Yeah, it's at this point, it's not worth taking you out because we'll only ruin the season and everything we've had so far. But yeah, he's done. Like everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people came into this season thinking that giving him any Ducati and he'd have an David Alonso style season where he was like head and shoulders and be able to just play with them. In modern day GP, you can't just it's kind of going, unfortunately, the way of Formula 1 where your equipment makes up most of your chance of winning. Part of the reason why I'm kind of sad to see Jorge Martin next year on Aprilia. I'm excited to see finally a top tier rider on that Aprilia. Unfortunately, I don't rate Maverick that well. I rate his talent unbelievably high. He's probably in my top 5, maybe top 3 in terms of outright talent, but the rest of the
Where was he today, for example? He was battling with Ralph Fernandez for 17th.
So yeah, well, the resident Maverick Vinales fan is saying that, so you know it's true. But Aleix has been that man over the year where he just gets the most. Like if you put him on that factory Ducati next to Marquez and Pecco and Martin, he doesn't beat them any day. I just don't see he doesn't have that last bit. So I think he was probably snubbed by a lot of the factories previously in his career, but he got the Aprilia factory ride when it wasn't anything special, and he's leaving it now as the second best bike in my opinion out there. It's probably a bit hit or miss on its day, but it's better overall than the KTM. It's definitely better than both Japanese bikes. So you can only applaud him for what he's done for that team. He's really going down in history's books for Aprilia, and yeah, like for me, it's just from Marquez, really, he's done what he needed to do this year, which kind of might sound stupid because he's won races and he's probably crashed a bit more than he should have. But what he needed to do was to try adapt himself to the Ducati. A lot of people still don't think he's fully adapted, which is kind of hard to agree with. No, he's had a full season on it, but I don't think the Ducati suits him personally. I think it is a bigger issue more than him being fully adapted. I don't think it suits him. The Honda always was very positive on the front end. You could kind of lever the front end a bit more than you could now, whereas the Ducati has always been historically a weak front end that they've managed to hide under 50,000 millimeters of carbon fiber on the front end with the aero. So I still think, as probably most people do, that if tomorrow we struck all the aero off the bikes and told them to go around, that the Ducati would have serious front end issues. I don't think, just the way the whole frame and the monocoque and stuff, I just don't think it's well designed for a good front end feeling compared to the Japanese bikes. So I think he still will always have that issue where the front end will never be to his liking. Now I think he's good enough that he can make the difference. We've seen that this year in many races. And again, he put him on 24 this year, probably wins the championship. He definitely pushes them the other two further. I think they get further along, because like even till like Sepang and Phillip Island, he wasn't a million miles away from the two of them. And overall, he doesn't have a rough season, but there's been lots of crashes. He's crashed so much this year out of the races. But he's still won race. He's still had a lot of podiums. When he finishes, he's usually right behind them, if not in between them. So he's had a good season. He's won again. He's going to probably brought a bit of the old mark back with that. A few victories and stuff. So he's definitely put himself on the right page for 25. It's just a question whether... It's probably not even a question, because most people think that 25 will be his year, but most people thought 24 he was going to wipe the field with people. And he's just finished third in the world. So we'll see. I'm probably, again, same way I've done with probably the Martin and Pecco last race this season, trying to maybe paint a picture that's not there. So maybe I'm probably bigging up that maybe he's not going to dominate that much next year, but I think he will be strong next year. It's just a question whether this kind of defeat for Pecco can he go away and reset and come back a better rider without these mistakes? Because I think on his day Pecco is unbeatable, but then at the same time Mark on his day is unbeatable. So it has to be, again, like I said a while ago, it has to be a loser. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a large point, but yeah, that's kind of how I see Marquez's season has been this year.
I think the thing is, obviously everyone expected him to dominate coming into this season, but I don't think anyone could foresee the performance jump the 24 bike would have. If you look previously, the 22 bike was very close to the 23, and the 21 bike was very close to the 22. Well, there was a bit more of a jump there, but that was COVID, because of the 21 bike was basically just 20 with a 1 painted instead of a 0. So yeah, it was usually the bikes are very close, whereas this year they weren't. The 24 was a big jump, and you can see that by the gap they had over everybody else. I mean, if you think back to Valencia last season, okay, Bagnaia won the last race of the season, obviously won the championship, but there was 2 KTMs ahead of him that both crashed out. There was KTM like 1-2 basically at one point, and they've not really been close up this season, aside from maybe Qatar, where the 24 wasn't dialed in. Binder was right there. Acosta had a couple of races where he could fight up there, but I think he was kind of making the difference himself, and as we saw at Motogp, he was just pushing over the limit, and I think that's also why, like you say, there was a lot of crashes for Marc Marquez this season, but I think his crashes weren't like Bagnaia's and mine's, where they were just stupid and came out of nowhere. Well, to be fair, Martin's, a lot of his were under pressure from Bagnaia, whereas a lot of Bagnaia's were kind of stupid and came out of nowhere. But Marquez was just like way overrun the bike and just would not accept second place. Like, you remember mid-season, I remember he crashed at Austria when he started catching Bagnaia like a little bit. Like, he was so desperate to win, he just was crashing every weekend trying to do that. I think he would have had a lot more points had he just settled. But obviously, that was his objective this season, was to win a race, so he didn't really care about the points. So, yeah, he kept chucking it at the scenery. But yeah, it will be interesting. Like you say, we don't want to spoil next season and say that he's going to absolutely dominate. And I don't think it will be like a clean sweep like some people have actually suggested, because I think there's tracks where Bagnaia is just so good. Like, it'd be good to see Assen somewhere like that. I think that could be could either be
Mugello
a
Bagnaia
domination, or it could just be really close,
track,
which could be really good to see. But yeah,
you need to remember though, Assen. Think of Marquez on a Honda Assen. He was like, Valentino was the king of Assen, and the two of them went at it pretty hard for a couple of years there. So
yeah, that's true.
I'd say there's not many better people.
He's only ever won there twice. So when you look at his record at other tracks, it's like,
yeah, I suppose he hasn't dominated there, but he's been very quick there. He probably 2013 he was injured. 2014 he won. 2015 it rained.
2015 was the famous one.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. No,
16 it rained. That was the Miller one.
Yeah, sorry. It's funny how 2015
was
season
very
was
close to winning.
Just a blur. Yeah. And again, to give Marquez credit, 2015 Honda was a bit of a dog. So 17 he wins.
17 Rossi
exactly.
It was 18.
Jesus Christ.
Come on. The resident Rossi fan has forgot the 2 Rossi really wins.
I know. It's been so many years. Ever since COVID, someone's decided to fast forwarding, and I can't remember what year it is. So 2018 he won. Did he win 2018? That was
that was the massive
and
one
Rossi
where, like,
punted each other
Rossi
off.
probably should have won if he didn't ran Lorenzo at the back. I think he lost a bit of confidence then.
Yeah. And after that, then it was kind of... what happened in
Maverick
19?
Maverick won. It was Maverick, Fabio and Mark were battling, and Fabio's bike was shaking down the straight.
Oh, yes, I remember that, yeah.
I'm sure there was the rumour that they'd slid the Lorenzo chassis out of Quartararo's bike and put it into Mavs for the race. Don't know how true that was.
I somehow don't believe that. But after
the Lorenzo
19,
chassis was still going strong then. It was 19.
That was the Preem chassis. But after 1980, any of Marquez's results are just kind of like irrelevant for my eyes, really. So I think if he's won 2 races between 13 and 19, he's probably won more from 20 to 24 if he's had a competitive package at Assen. But that's just we'll see next year. It's not like we've long to wait.
No, there's not. There really isn't long. Very short off season this season. I'm sure the first race is the last week of February, which is crazy. So
mad.
Yeah, like not even 3 months. So yeah. Anyway, enough about Marc Marquez outperforming his bike. I'm sure we'll be talking about that plenty next season. So we don't need to. He won't be outperforming it, I guess, because it'll be a good bike anyway. But anyway, on to someone that's leaving the paddock now. Aleix Espargaro, obviously, this weekend, he wasn't expecting it to be like this. Obviously, he had his last race at Barcelona, his proper home track, earlier on in the season. But then, obviously, with the venue change, he got to have his last race at Barcelona as well, which was quite nice for him. Back to form, basically. He kind of dropped off the second half of the season. The Aprilia as a whole has dropped off, but Vinales has kind of still been there or thereabouts. He actually was still in the fight coming into this weekend for the top non-Ducati, but obviously didn't manage to do that with a pretty poor weekend. Well, he qualified well. Actually, you know what? Fun stat. Vinales got through his Q2 every single race this season, directly from practice. That kind of shows you.
That just shows how, if you give him a cold track with no grip, no ideal setup, he can ride. But then when other people start to understand it, he goes backwards. Yeah. That is just the most Vinales stat you'll ever see.
King of the test day. He'll be tough on Tuesday.
King of the Fridays. King of when it doesn't bloody matter. Jesus.
Yeah, but
What a frustration.
kind of shows anyway that he was flying the flag for Aprilia the second half of the season really, and Leish had kind of not checked out. I think it's a bit unfair to say, but the bike was struggling, and when you are retiring, like you're not going to throw everything at the scenery for no reason. Basically, like he's not there to benefit from anything that they do this year, and you know. So he kind of has been a bit off it, but back to form this weekend at a track he really goes well at. He's always gone well here. I mean, he's good here on the Ford, Yamaha even, and I remember Suzuki, did they get that 1-2 on the grid or something? I was like really crazy at the time when that happened, because it was like their first year back. And yeah, he's had some really, really good races here. Looked like he's having another really, really good one this weekend. I think, to be honest, he could have had better results this weekend, but he was riding rear gunner, wasn't he? Let's be honest, especially in the main race. I think he could have charged for the podium, but he was helping his mate out, which I suppose is fair enough. That's what he wants to do. He had the nice little cool down lap moment after the sprint. I did wonder why they did it after the sprint, but I guess they didn't want to sort of do it at the same time that the championship ceremony would be going on, like the championship celebration. So I guess it kind of makes sense. But he rode his little 1-2-5 back to the pits, and there's one of the guys from the team dressed as him riding his bike back, which was quite funny. Just seeing two Alecias, like he just cut to two Alecias riding around. I was like, what's going on here? It was a bit weird, but yeah, I think to be fair to Aleix, I mean, to give him the send off he deserves. I mean, he has achieved so much more in his career than I think most people ever thought he would do. Even 5 years ago, he hadn't really ever done much, and you know, he sort of bounced from team to team. He was fantastic back on the ART back in the day, and the CRT bikes. He whipped all the other CRTs. Then he was on the Open Yamaha again. He whipped all the other Open bikes, got a podium, got pole positions on what was, you know, not a... To be fair, the Ford Yamaha actually wasn't that bad, really. It was like an M1 with a different fairing on it, I guess, a different frame. But even still, it was, you know, it was not supposed to be a full spec GP bike. You know, then obviously he got on the Suzuki. Had some moments where outperformed by Vinales, moved to Aprilia when it was terrible. You know, was some of those weekends, sort of 17, 18, where he was finishing 7th, 8th. Those were fantastic considering how bad the bike was. Got the podiums when the bike finally came good. Had the title tilt in 22. Obviously didn't quite come together for him, but you know, he was there till the last couple of rounds, which again I don't think anyone would have expected. Won a few races now, podium solidly. And he's a rider you expect to be there at some tracks, and I think that's got to be it's got hats off to him, because I think you'd think 10 years ago, well, maybe not even that Pole was the faster Espargaro, but I don't think that was the case. I think as it's turned out, it's been Aleix has been the faster Espargaro. He's stayed in the class longer despite being the older one, and yeah, I think he's had a really, really good career. I think you can be proud of what he's achieved, and I'll be interested to see what he does as a Honda test rider, because I think clearly he's got the talent for it, because he's made the Aprilia go from absolute dog to what is one of the better bikes on the grid, and be interested to see how the Honda goes. Because I mean, I don't know if I said it on the podcast before, but I've still questioned how good Bradl is as a test rider, but it'd be really good to see how Aleix gets on, and yeah, it'd be a wish him the best of luck, and hopefully we'll see him pop up for the odd wild card. I'm sure he'll be doing some Catalunya wild cards in the coming years, and maybe we'll be seeing a Honda back towards the sharp end a little bit more.
Just quickly before I talk about late, Stefan Bradl is also gone at the end of the year from Honda's test rider. He's finished with them, so
he's gone, is he now?
He's completely gone. Yeah, it's been it's not been announced, but I saw basically today that was that he will not be, like, today was his last weekend with them, so. I know
he said he thought it was going to be his last race, because I think he thought he wouldn't get the wildcards anymore, but I assumed he was still staying.
No, it looks like he's fully gone from the team, or fully gone from that test, right? Which would make sense, I suppose, if you're bringing in late, what you need Stefan from, really, yeah. I suppose. And not to be like Stefan is a world champion in his own right, but they have not moved any way forward while he's been their test rider. Whereas if you look at I suppose what BMW have done in Superbikes with Quintoli as their test rider, Pirro for Ducati, how many steps they've made over the years as him. So it shows that one of the critical parts of a team is having a very strong test rider. Pedrosa, again, another one to mention for KTM. So, yeah, showing a lot of, I suppose, effort at getting elation, getting a very, very good rider. And he probably doesn't have that last 1% of a world champion that they can just find that last bit of time, but I think he's very good at understanding what the bike needs to go fast and how the bike is performing on circuit. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's on. But you kind of summed up, really. He's had a better career than probably most, if you remember back, like he was on that Pramac Ducati about 15 years ago. So he's been in the class for so long. He's been in so many different teams, and probably looking back, it probably was a mistake for Suzuki to not keep him, because they probably could have done with him for a couple of years. He probably could have developed that team into something a bit better. But I think at the time, just being beaten by a rookie in Vinales probably just didn't make it, wasn't very good for his stock value. So Aprilia jumped on him, and he has been the saving grace of Aprilia. If it wasn't for Leish, I'd say Aprilia might have already pulled the plug on this MotoGP project, which would have been really sad, because we're in world motorsport, especially bikes, were losing a lot of manufacturers from the top tiers. So it'd be horrible to lose one in GP. So the fact that Aprilia now is competitive, it is really a massively down to Leish, and he had a very good weekend this weekend. Again, I agree. I think he gets podiums in both main race and sprint if he can actually be allowed to kind of have his own race weekend. But I don't think Aprilia will mind too much that they managed to get the number one from 24 to be on the bike for 25, and with a small bit of assistance in Barcelona from Leish. So yeah, fair play to them. And I think over the career, I don't know who would have been quicker over the Espargaro brothers, but I still feel Leish got more out of what he had, whereas Paul massively underperformed for his career. I think Paul was a letdown throughout his career, because I think like Paul was the original rider that was signed to the Yamaha factory contract that was supposed to be the guy to take over the mantle from Rossi, and obviously never did. Went to KTM and stuff like that, and probably should never went to the Repsol obviously after 2020 vision looking back. But it was a real career ender going to Repsol for him, unfortunately. And I think if he stays with KTM, he could be maybe still there in some sort of maybe the second team, because well, like in the actual race team,
like you probably would have him as Augusto Fernandez, maybe.
100%. Yeah, I think that would have been a good thing. And I think
maybe inside Miller or something like that,
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe like the fact that they've gone and got Bastianini and Vinales for their second team next year, I think it was a bit of a weird one. I felt like they just kind of signed whoever was there, but and I suppose there's no young riders they could have brought up. I think it's too early for Andrew to move up. And I don't think they have anyone else really to stick on the bike. So they've just signed race winners across the class. So it's a bit of a weird one for KTM. Their team next year is a bit weird looking, but yeah, I still think Paul could potentially still be in the class, because I think his talent deserved to be there. But he was one of those guys, he just never seemed to be able to do it consistently enough, and the jump to Honda really killed his career for him, unfortunately. And hopefully his brother's jump to Honda will be a bit more successful.
Yeah, hopefully so, because like you say, it wasn't good. And yeah, I think for Paul, he never delivered on the day, did he? That was the problem. There were days where he could have won Grand Prix and he didn't. Obviously, there was always the Austria one that stands out, but I remember the same thing was at 22 at Qatar. Valence in the rain, yeah. Yeah, Valence in the rain, but it is wet, it's hard, and the KTM was pretty bad back then. He was doing quite a good job to even be where he was. It was tricky for him. I mean, he finished third, I think, though. That was quite a good result.
Yeah, he still did well, 100%.
I don't think he was beating Dovi, because I think Dovi's better than him, frankly. So, yeah.
100%.
And he was on a better bike, so it's always up against it, really. But anyway, that was obviously Leish, and as we said, he helped out his mate today, Jorge Martin, the champion. Obviously, we already spoken a decent length about summarising their season, so yeah, I guess just kind of hats off to him and the Pramac team. Obviously, it's the first time we've ever seen it in the MotoGP era, a satellite team win the championship. I guess the last time it happened was the Rossi team, technically, but I feel like that one's always a bit questionable, because I think it is just they repainted the factory bike that year for him for a sponsorship reason. Basically, it was still had Repsol on the belly pan, still had all of Doohan's crew basically, so it was effectively a factory bike still. But even still, obviously the MotoGP era, it's never actually happened. So hats off to Martin and the Pramac team, and it's great to see the Pramac team as well, because it's been interesting if you've been watching MotoGP for a long time, see their rise. You go back to like 15 years ago, they were kind of like, well, they were a satellite team. They've always been a Ducati satellite team pretty much as well for a long, long time. And obviously it's going to be the end of the era for that. But you go back to then, they were, miles back really. They were just not a backmarker team, but there were times where they were towards the back and they've slowly made their way through, like the years when they had Petrucci and they were threatening the odd race win, and he just came up short and wasn't able to do it for them. And then obviously Martin gets on the bike and he manages to bring home the first win for the team, and it's all crazy. And he then battles for the championship last year, and they win the team's championship last year. That was a massive moment, and this year they win the riders, and just the evolution of the team as a whole is great. I'd be interested to see what you think to his celebrations as well. Obviously, we always get the interesting celebrations. I remember that I'll never forget the Fabio CGI Devil. I mean, what was that all about? That was so bizarre. I'll never forget that one. Bagnaia, obviously, with the rings last year, it's like the basketball reference, I guess, with that. Don't know what he did the year before now. I can't actually remember the first championship win. Remember the Marquez 8 ball. You know, some of these ceremonies in the past. There was the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where there was Rossi one year, and plenty of different ones. But interesting one this time. It's always the awkward part. We have to wait 10 minutes for them to get changed to their other set of leathers. And they came out with the Terminator mask on, and I thought it was actually quite cool. I shot the ice and that broke, and the helmet was in there. But it's always interesting to see the celebrations.
I think the modern ones are too CGI'd and technical, and they take too much setup. I think if you go back to the Rossi era and some of the Marquez ones, they're much more organic, where they're the 8-ball bowling and stuff. That was cool, and they have the little a little obstacle course set up, and they go do something that's cool. But I think the Top Rock one where you had to get into a whole set of letters, and that was just like you're waiting around. And same here now again with Martin getting into a set of letters. When they go into some sort of unit, I think, funny enough, only last night I watched back Sepang 2009 when Valentino won his ninth, and I watched some of the race and I skipped just to see the celebrations. And he is a chicken and an egg, and the egg is number 9, and the chicken has Rossi gear on now, and it's weird and funny. But he puts on a shirt, or he puts on a t-shirt over the
that's
letters.
what they always used to do, wasn't it? They just stuck a shirt on.
It was just his celebration.
Yeah.
But now, there's fair enough. Look, I don't mind. I have no problem with the special helmet, the gold helmet. The best one this year for me was David Alonso's one, because that was just normal. That was just a good one, because there was no messing around, there was no waiting time. Whereas I think especially Top Racks and Martins just went on for too long, and I guess by we're right, come on, a lot of people, and not only that, but you're holding up all the whole kind of paddock really, because you have to wait for him to get back. But I do like the riding back an old bike, or just something a bit different. But I think the blowing up the glass, or the ice iron helmet was cool, but the 10 minutes of him sitting inside that little box getting changed is not for me, unfortunately. And again, the CGI Devil, I think the Devil was the worst part of that, but I did like seeing Fabio his highlight reel back on screen. That was quite cool.
There was some good parts of that. I mean, I don't think he even really saw the Devil or anything, did he? But that was just so random how that was there.
It was just it wasn't the best part of it. But again, I think if you go back to some of the older celebrations, or they were better than the new ones, because I think they were just more simplistic, and they just weren't. They were just more, because everything now is there's some sort of reference, and there's sponsorships in it. Whereas back in the day it was let's go bowling. I've won 8 world titles. Let's let me throw a ball at 8 different titles, and kind of things like that. The Lorenzo one in 15, as much as that was kind of a horrible day, the 5 Lorenzos in different letters, and he stood and posed. That was a brilliant celebration. Again, Marquez's ones were quite good over the years. I think even Pecco's ones with the rings, I think it was quite cool, because that's a big reference that when you win,
he's a big basketball fan, isn't he?
He's big basketball, but when you win the Super Bowl or the national series in the basketball, you get a ring for that year. So the fact you had 3 rings is 3-time champions. Again, for me, it's a bit more simplistic, and it made more sense. Again, I think these whole elaborate ones can kind of get a bit messy. I go back to the Dav Alonso, and that was just pretty cool. And the little crash and the crash icon popping up, that was the best part of that for me. So, look, I suppose I can sit here pretty easily and say God knows what I'd do if I ever became world champion. But it's I suppose it's a special moment. They can celebrate it whatever they want, but I just feel it could be maybe sped up slightly.
Remember the Bagnaia one when he won MotoGP, and he took ages to get changed, didn't he? And especially in that case, you got to get the MotoGP race on, so you can't delay it. And then he couldn't get the bike started, could he?
Yeah, Sepang got heat sink. Didn't they try to change the
fairing?
Changed the fairing.
They changed the fairing on the bike. Yeah. They changed. That's why they had to switch the bike off, I think, instead of keeping it running. Then he changed his suit and helmet and stuff, and it's guys, we got the MotoGP race.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what Agora did now for his. Can't even
just recall. A special helmet more than anything, really.
Yeah. he went and
did
played
he
that
play
board game, didn't he?
Backgammon?
Yeah,
What's that
yeah.
called?
Some kind of...
I can't think of it. Some board
Again,
game
that's
played.
like alright, isn't it? One of those.
It's
little ones,
simplistic because you just get off the bike. There's a little something set up. You do it. The cameras all around. There's plenty of pictures. You get your special limit. You move on. But I think going in, getting changed stuff. Look, if you want to do that, maybe in the pitch or something, or do it kind of maybe, I don't know, maybe do somewhere else. But I think right after the race, trying to get changed out of leather.
If you want to do that, you got to practice your quick change. That's what I reckon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe have a cape, put a cape over leathers.
Yeah, or just like a t-shirt that used to do. That's what they used to do, innit? They put the World Champion 2005 whatever, like t-shirt, or the massive 7 t-shirt that he put on that time, or I know Bye Bye Baby wasn't a championship winning one, but still, just that kind of thing that they used to
That's
do.
more memorable than the devil. Like things like that are more memorable because
the devil's memorable just because of how bad it was. I'll never forget that. But that was obviously Martin's celebration. So that's the MotoGP sorted. But I did just want to pass one final question, I guess, to you before the end of the season, the end of the podcast. What's your overall summary of the season across the 3 classes? Just short answer. What are your thoughts of the season as a whole? What are you left when we're leaving the 2024 season? How will you sort of remember it?
For Moto 3, it was that we saw a superstar kind of take the world stage by storm, and the Pirelli change has changed up the class. That's probably Moto 3 in a nutshell. Moto 2, Pirellis were the making of that class for me, coupled with maybe Cadix not being as dominant. I think just the whole shake up of that class has been brilliant. I think that's probably been one of my favourite championships of the year so far. And GP it's just the problems are getting more and more evident that the racing is poor. There's been, I think, there's a lot of crashes for people who can't race. It's just, again, I go back to last night that I watched a bit of 2015 Qatar, I watched a bit of 2009 Sepang. These races they were just so much better back then. There was racing, the bikes moved around, whereas everything now is just, it's a bit dull, unfortunately, and it's very sad because these bikes are absolutely unbelievable creations, and they are a testament to the teams and the manufacturers. But the racing and the enjoyment and the whole show just isn't as good. And I think going into the Liberty Media era now, I'm kind of a bit worried to see where the class goes, because apparently on Tuesday, tomorrow, from when this podcast out, we're getting new logos, and they've been apparently leaked and they're not good. So I think
it's tonight. They get unveiled tonight. It's at the FIM ceremony. Yeah, it's the FIM ceremony. Right. So it'll be yesterday evening as it was released. I think there's a Game of Thrones actress. I don't know who she is, but she must be a fairly big deal.
Clark, blonde.
Is it Amelia Clark? Something like that. I don't know.
Amelia or Emma or something.
I think she's unveiling the logos. But so they've been leaked. Apparently, there's going to be colour on them, so they won't look exactly like how they are. But they don't look great, do they?
Like for me, again, would it not make more sense to bring back I'm going to pick a rider like Kevin Schwantz, McDoon, bring back a Agostini, get them to reveal it. Just like why bring in it's a very Liberty Media thing, because they did the same with F1. They got, I think she might have even done the F1 one as well, or someone else. But like I don't watch much TV. I don't really care about an actress coming and revealing it. I'd much rather see. I don't think it's really for us though, is it? That's the thing. It's true. But like at the same time,
it's to suck new fans in, I guess. But yeah,
I still think I'd rather see Lars Caparossi. I'd rather see an ex-rider do it, or even even the current Red Bull rookie champion, or just someone like keep it in house. Like, it's the way I see it, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Moto E champion. I don't know. I'm probably just a bit not the best to be talking about this, but to kind of finish up on just the GP point. Average enough season, not great racing, not very memorable, littered with mistakes. But I said tip my hat to Martin, because at the end of the day he was still fabulous. So was Pecco. But I just think that the GP class at the moment is in a bit of hot water, and it's not looking good for the future.
Yep, I pretty much agree, especially with the GP stuff. So we'll have to see next year if things improve. But obviously, no new tyre for us, and still ride-up devices. So probably not, but we will see going into the next season. And that pretty much brings us to the end then of 2024. Do want to say thank you very much to every single one of you that have listened to the podcast, whether that's on Spotify or YouTube, or if you've managed to listen to it somewhere else. I don't know how you've done that, but if you've listened to it there as well, thank you very much. And if you do enjoy the podcast, do rate it 5 stars on Spotify or like the video on YouTube, because it does help us out very, very much. Now, you may hear from us again before the 2025 season, maybe some off-season podcasts, but we'll have to see how we go with that and decide what topics that we decide to cover. But thank you very much for listening this season, and we'll see you in the next episode.